Hello and welcome to Fearless DIY Music. My name is Tristan Lass, and today I'm joined by my dear friend Kevin Gamble. Once again, we are going to have a conversation about a topic, but before we jump into that, I think Kevin wanted to reference one of the more recent pieces of content on the channel. So take it away, Kevin.
Hey Tris, good to be here again. Good to see you. And there's always good stuff to check out on the channel. But I wanted to point out a video from this past week or so that people should check out if they haven't already. It's about order of modulation pedals. And I know you focused on pedals in the video, but it could just be order of modulation effects, because there are a lot of different ways to get those effects now. But it I think it's worth people checking out, mainly because in addition to your discussion of the pedals and their effects on the sound, you demonstrate different orders of modulation pedals, in different sequences, one going into the other, and then swapping the order and different combinations. So I think it's really worth checking out. In a short video, you get a lot of sound demos as well as some good insight on what makes those combinations work for you and how people can apply that to their own sound, or Alex Lifeson's sound as they wish.
Yeah.
So yeah, check that one out.
Yeah, I think that there are so many things about stacking your gain stages, or stacking distortion and stuff like that, and actually kind of like taking a moment to reflect upon how you go about doing modulation. It's something that I wrestled with for years. So, and it just over the years, I discovered that there are certain things that just work better going in that order. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I hope that whoever goes and checks it out learns a little something from what I had to offer. Anyway, I think that everybody's been seeing around the interwebs here for the past couple weeks, that Behringer is currently being sued by Finnegan, the creator of the Klon Centaur pedal. And before we jump directly into that, there's something I wanted to talk about just in general about cloning of pedals, period. Especially when it comes to overdrives and fuzzes. We'll start with fuzz. There's a reason why most boutique pedal makers out there have like 50% of their catalog is fuzz. Usually in a lot of cases, unless they're doing DSP stuff, unless it's all digital kind of things. But people who are doing analog guitar pedals usually cut their teeth making, variations of either the big muff or the fuzz face or the tone bender. And there's a reason for that. Those circuits are very simple. They were all originally generated from electronic worksheets, where basically like this new thing, these new transistors were just developed during, and becoming into, mass production and easily available in the, mid to late 60s and in the early 70s. And then all of a sudden you have silicon coming out, and then the op amp comes out. And these are all very simple devices. There's only, on a standard transistor, there's three legs on it. So you don't have a whole lot of different ways that you can wire that up to have it do something that you want it to do. And op amps, the original ones I believe had 8 legs on them. So, there's not an infinite variety of things you can do with these devices. Thereby, you've got like, DoD, had the 250, which was a clone of the MXR Distortion Plus, which was, one of the first, pedals developed that got out of the fuzz territory and turned into an actual distortion unit or an overdrive style unit versus just a fuzz, which just kind of broke things more. And then the same thing could be said, they're about fuzz. Fuzz, you've got, 4 transistors in a big muff. You've got 2 in a silicon fuzz face, handful of capacitors and resistors along with that. My favorite circuit of that era is the Electra circuit, which is a single transistor, 3 resistors and 2 capacitors, and both those capacitors are the same value. So you're talking about in the history of guitar pedal making, there has always been a relatively small batch of ingredients involved. LEDs change things a little bit too, because all of a sudden you could get something that, rather than having a germanium or a silicon clipping diode, all of a sudden you're using an LED. So when those came about as mass-produced things, we start getting more, into like, not quite. The Rat was one of the first. The Turbo Rat. They used LEDs as clipping diodes instead of the usual diodes. So to preface all of this, is that there's a small batch of ingredients. There's always been stealing of ideas, but all those ideas came from the same engineering book that all these makers and builders looked at, because there's only so many ways you can wire these things.
Yeah.
All of that being said, Klon comes around, and Bill Finnegan develops, this new pedal, in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. He's developing it. He's dissatisfied with all the distortion boxes out there. I think the two notable things, or the things that everybody always three notable things everybody talks about with the Klon, is that you've got germanium clipping diodes in it, matched pair, very specific tolerances that those diodes have to match to work for the circuit. You have the charge pump, and then you have the way that the gain knob works, where it retains some of the clean signals. So, there's this cool kind of swapping of that's why it works as a clean boost, and so many people think it's magic in that kind of almost no gain section, even though it was never meant to be used that way. It was meant to be cranked up and used as a distortion pedal. All of that being said, the Klon has been cloned just like any other pedal. There were some new developments in there, and so people took Finnegan's design, and when Finnegan kind of stopped making them, which he isn't making them right now, as far as I know. He's not it's the KTR, right? Is the red one was the one that kind of was the second gen. I don't think he's making either. He hasn't made a real, quote unquote, real Klon in a long time. So there's all sorts of Klon clones out there. Some of them look remarkably like a Klon, with the oxblood knobs, the gold finish, some sort of horseman or archer or something on it. Every major maker I can think of has something that's Klon-esque. Even the mainstream makers like MXR, they have the Fat Sugar, and then they have the Sugar Drive. Those are Klon clones. They're all over the place. Behringer, however, has run into trouble and is now being sued, and the controversy isn't necessarily around what's inside of it, but how it looks on the outside. The idea is that Behringer has gone too far in appropriating the trade dress, is what a lot of the pedal builders like to call it, in that it, to the untrained eye, somebody could look at it and go, that's a Klon Centaur. We'll go into my thoughts about the merits of that lawsuit, but I wanted to first get, since I've spoken for so long, your take on what I've already covered, and maybe your take on the merits of this lawsuit.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting case, Tris. And as you described, we've gotten here by degrees. We've gotten here by a lot of small incremental degrees over time, where, it started out as a very small pool of available technologies, and the practice became for those ideas to mix and match. And that's a cool idea they've got. Let's take that and figure out what we can do to make it our own and sell it as an entirely separate pedal. And now we're at the case with Behringer, where, as you said, they are appropriating everything about a product. They're appropriating the colors, the logos, the control layouts, everything. And it's not a case of necessarily fooling people that this is the original thing, but it's kind of taking the whole intellectual property and artistic approach in one bucket and turning that over as a product. And I've watched this evolve over the years, through some of the other kinds of pedals you alluded to that are inspired by the same circuit but look and are branded completely differently, to what we have now, which are outright copies. And I've always had mixed feelings about it, because, I'm very much opposed to that kind of wholesale copying and repurposing, like in music, with AI or sampling, unauthorized sampling, or things like that. And so it feels a little weird. On one hand, you have, a lot of things being cloned have been out of production for decades and not going to be in production, as far as we can tell.
Like the Mutron stuff.
Right. Yeah. There's all kinds of examples in pedals and synths and things like that.
Yeah.
The only way to get them is to spend exorbitant amounts of money, and even if you do that, the original maker's not benefiting at all or getting any kickbacks from that. It kind of keeps the name in the public consciousness, but that's it. But there is an argument apart from the appearance type of thing that if you're taking someone's intellectual property, and they're still around as a person and an individual, even if they're not making them. You're, on one hand, you're filling a void that they're not actively part of. On the other hand, are you taking away the potential for their business model? Say they wanted to start making things again. Well, you've already saturated the market with your clones, and that impacts their ability to use their intellectual property in that way. So it's I don't know. There are a lot of different issues that feed into this, and maybe you want to stick to the merits of the lawsuit, and that's fine. But it really touches on kind of a general ethical thing that where we've reached a point, I think, in our culture where sort of free, open copying of things without any compensation has become normalized to such an extent that it's interesting to see at this point to see anyone go back up against stream on that, such as in this case, and try to say this is too far, this isn't sustainable, and here's where we draw the line.
Yes, because I agree with everything, but I do want to I think that this is a case example where I can come up with some things that we can talk about that show why I think this lawsuit has actually happened. Because you could look at Warm Audio. Warm Audio has a Klon that doesn't, and I don't think that the Behringer or the Warm Audio, you'd have, if you're shopping for a Klon, like an original Klon, you're gonna, I think that you can tell the difference really quickly. I mean, the size of the box, the way the knobs are spaced, the patina. I mean, Klons are old, so if something is brand new and shiny and it says brand new, on the website, it's not a Klon. It can't be. Just so I think that part of it's a little disingenuous, and say if you're going to take the legal angle that you can come in and be like, oh, somebody's going to buy this Behringer for somebody, puts it up for $2,000 and says that it's a real Klon. I think that people are smarter than that. That being said, the warm audio is one example, but first we'll start with JHS. JHS just put out this kit, the Nauticlon, and I won't go into all the problems they've had. They've since discontinued it. If you want to see that saga, go to the JHS website. It's all there. But basically, Josh at JHS has been cloning things forever. And I think the reason why nobody got mad at him about the Nauticlon is, number one, it's a kit. Number two, it's in his generic trade dress of, the JHS vibe of these, white and black. There's no mistaking it for what it is. It has a second circuit included with it. However, the guts of it are the same as a Klon. I mean, Josh is a master cloner, so his whole thing is that it's going to be a genuine Klon, and you're getting it for $119.
Yeah, in an IKEA box.
In an IKEA box, yes. So I think it's why he's not in trouble. Plus, he has a relationship with Bill Finnegan directly. Like, he has, they communicate. So if Finnegan's not doing something, Josh felt like he was okay with putting that pedal out because Finnegan's not doing anything. And I think that nobody's going after Mythos or these other people either, because of the fact their pedals look like part of their line of products, even though the guts are the same, if not almost the same. They're clones. Warm Audio. Theirs in the Behringers, if you just put them next to each other, I mean, it's the same damn idea. It's got the same vibe, it's got the same colors, it's got the, but Warm Audio put Warm Audio on the front of it. It says Warm Audio on the front of that pedal. So you're immediately going, this is a Warm Audio product. Where Behringer screwed up, I think, is there's nothing that says Behringer on the front of that pedal. Nothing. There's not a thing that says that this is a Behringer product. They
Yeah.
also really seem to pay attention to those little contours on the box too. So when a photograph, a digital image of it is taken, you do see those kind of contours and
Yeah.
the
The ridges.
textures
Yeah.
and the
Mm-hmm.
ridge, exactly, the ridges
Mm-hmm.
in the photograph. And I think that it's just those little minuscule things just pushed the apple cart over the edge.
Yeah.
And if Behringer had just put Behringer on the front of it, I don't think this would have ever happened. Also, my guess is that, if Finnegan's not making stuff, and I don't know what his personal finances are or anything like that, maybe this is like maybe a lawyer contacted him and said, this is one where, this is so close and this is so egregious, and the fact that they didn't put their own brand on it, they are trying to fool people into buying something you created, and they've stolen your trade dress completely. I think that, I'm no lawyer, but just as an armchair person who knows a few things, I would say that maybe he's got a 50% shot at getting some money out of Behringer on this one,
Yeah.
and he
Well, I
might
think
think
so.
that too.
Yeah.
He might think
Mm-hmm.
that too. So why not do it? He couldn't,
Mm-hmm.
he wouldn't have a leg to stand on, I think, if he went after, Josh Scott, or if he went after, Mythos, or if he went after, MXR. I mean, MXR stuff doesn't even remotely look like a Klon. It looks like an MXR pedal, and they completely named it something that's not even cheeky. They
Yeah.
just came up with their own name for it. So
Yeah.
I think that that's where it sits. And, I just think that everybody has to remember, though, is that everybody does it. So, but where is that line? Like you said, that's I guess that's the meta question. So we went into the specifics just now, but we do kind of end up back where you started us, where it's like, okay, where is the line in the sand where, if your singer sings like a singer from another band and your guitar tone's the same as the guitar tone of that band and your songs are almost identical, are you doing something on your own, or are you just trying to cash in on what they created, or even like try to look like them and make money off of their image? And I think it's that image thing. It's that like visual, that's a Klon kind of thing, or that is that. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're doing one or the other, it's like, oh, they have the look of some other band, or oh, they kind of sound like this song or whatever, then it's one element of a bigger puzzle. But when they've got everything at the same time, they're cloning what the guts of it, they're cloning the outside of it, they're minimizing their own brand on it.
Yeah.
That's where it starts to just kind of look really intentional. And they've been pushing it for a while with their products. They've been pushing it with their synths. And it's
Yeah.
interesting to see the different ways that people handle this. I mean, you mentioned the Rat earlier. It reminded me of both JHS and Wampler have kind of
Yeah.
Rat updates, and JHS has a Tube Screamer update where it kind of is like a family of sounds in one pedal. It's like you've got the history of different
Yeah.
versions of it by turning a knob, and then they've got their own version of it in there too. Hey, this is our take on it. Here's that as part of your palette to choose from, and it has our branding, and it alludes to it. So it's a lot of gray lines along the way. But this, I agree. This is a case where it almost seems like Behringer is trying to see how far they can take their operating model, and outright clone things. And it's interesting the way different makers are handling it. Over in the synth world, there's a maker of VST synths clones called Cherry Audio. They make very nice virtual synthesizers for use as plugins and DAWs, and most of them are clones of earlier products.
Sure.
And for a while they were kind of straight clones of specific models, and more recently they've kind of blurred it a little bit, where a clone will be kind of a combination of two different vintage synths and their features, and kind of an expanded feature set while keeping the original sound. And they'll like make a donation to the foundation of the creator of the original synth, whether it's Moog or someone else. And so you can see that kind of, I don't know, kind of trying to acknowledge the inherent theft, so to speak, in it, the taking of it, while also recognizing that what you said, the environment is everybody does it. But another thing with the Klon that I wanted to mention is, one other aspect of that original pedal that is different than most of them is the way he obscured the guts of the pedal, by basically putting the best attempt at an unbreakable concealment over the circuitry. So that right there, when you open the box and you see that, the message is, I don't want you taking what I've made.
What I've made, yeah.
What I created, what I invented and envisioned. And of course, that's, you can only do so much with that, and we see that hasn't stopped anybody at the end of the day. But
yeah, Dumble did the same stuff. So
yeah, exactly. So from that original sort of message in the product to the degree to which Behringer has taken everything about the product, it's good bookends, I think, for looking at this whole process of how this works. And I think coming up with a line is ultimately going to be a healthy thing, because I think straight copies, are ultimately diminishing returns. And I'd kind of like to see something more formalized in the area, whatever it looks like.
Yeah, I don't know if that kind of, if a precedent is set, it will just scare people. I think it's such a legal gray area. It's kind of like, trying to copyright a chord progression. You can't do that, but you can copyright a melody. And so it's going to be difficult because there's only so many, things out there. Just to kind of wrap up, there's two things that I wanted to say. One is, why did Behringer do this? Why didn't they just put their name on the front of it? I think that there's a market out there for certain people who would want to have that, and then maybe, have it up on their board, and it's a side-eye look by other people, and maybe try to fool, oh, that could be a real that guy's got a real Klon on his board. Maybe is that their intended audience? I mean, why did they do it? And number two is there a market for that? Where it's like, oh, are there people out there that are like, I don't, who are scratching those kind of things off of, similar type of pedals where they, take nail polish remover and get rid of the Warm Audio logo so that they can show their friends and go, oh, look, I got a Klon, And so I just wonder, because if you have studied it at all and knew the history of it even vaguely, you would know that it wouldn't be one. But so anyway, that's just kind of like my last little bit would be like, what was the intention behind this? It couldn't have hurt them just to put their logo on there and just,
It seems like they had a working business model of the very similar but not identical already. And so, what's the motivation to take that further than they already did, which already seemed far enough. So maybe it's a way to sort of, maybe this is a sacrificial thing to set their own legal boundaries. So all the other stuff they've done is kind of rendered acceptable. It's like, okay, we won't do this one little detail because you've determined that's what's too far. But now the rest of our business model is safe. I don't know. But yeah, from a marketing standpoint, it doesn't seem to jibe. It almost seems like the uncanny valley where it's like, if it's so close that you can't tell the difference, then that kind of has a cheapness of its own that doesn't have the the cachet of an originally designed pedal that can kind of have its own identity.
Yeah, which they have done in the past, and Behringer can make stuff. So, but it's just interesting, and I think that if nothing else, this will serve as just a cautionary tale to everybody else. I think that, but the cloning is going to continue. I mean, it's just like there's it's funny. It's like the mid 1950s, part of the 60s, and then into the 70s a bit, and maybe a few handful of things from the 80s. We're just going to be stuck in the guitar universe for a long time with just these same things being like the things that people ultimately want, or it may not be the only thing that you have, but everybody wants to have, the Strat, the Les Paul, a Tweed, whatever. And then, maybe some designs, the pedals of the 70s, and then some of the digital signal processing, the early digital signal processing of the 80s, which everybody says is magical because it has the old chips in it, and those chips aren't made anymore. So I think we're going to be always wrestling with this, but I just thought it was a good point of departure for our discussion today.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. If you've watched the video to this point, please hit the subscribe button. Likes and shares are also greatly appreciated, and leave something in the comments. And I did a little teaser in a short recently. If you're still watching this right now, leave in the comments, what do you think is the most cloned petal of all time? If I had to pick, my pick would be the fuzz face. So, and Kevin, do you have a pick for the most cloned petal of all time?
Oof, it's hard to think of something that beats that. Like you said, that one kind of goes right back to the source. And
Tube Screamer. Tube Screamer would be another
Tube
one.
Screamer. Yeah. That would probably be the biggest competition, I think.
Yeah. All right. Hit subscribe, and we'll see you next time with another video. You take care.